Marketer, I'm about to share a confusing experiment. But first, here's an easy question. Study the top of these 2 pages. Which one will produce the most leads? Now, most marketers would probably choose the second option. It is the treatment. And by the way, they would be right. The treatment outperformed the control by 246%. But it did not win because it had more content. It won because it strategically positioned elements of the value proposition. But here's another experiment. And this study is surprising, if not confusing. Look at the control. Now, look at the treatment. Now compare them. What is the primary difference? If you've noticed the difference in length, you are right. But the treatment, while much, much longer, outperformed the control by 32%. We have to ask why. Haven't we all heard about the dangers of too much copy? Well, the crucial element is not the length of our copy. The crucial element is the articulation of sufficient value. If you look at the treatment again, and you see all of these V's representing value, you see how we used the length to achieve sufficiency, to achieve with clarity something necessary before the prospect could say yes. We amplified the value proposition. Which brings us to that whole concept, value prop. What is a value proposition? In fact, what is your working definition? Can you express right now your value prop? Can your team? Would they all express the same articulation? Can you do so in less than 30 seconds? If not, you have a problem. Now, if you'll take a moment and write it down, you'll learn more today. And if you'd like, you can write it in the YouTube comments, and I will respond, review, and try to help you. Anyone who replies in the next 7 days will get some help from me, if I can. But now back to this concept. I want to move on by relating a story. And it'll sound for a moment like I'm bragging. I don't mean it to be that way. But if you'll listen, you'll get a reason. And in the end, that reason will unfold. To do this, I'm going to share 5 slides from the MECLABS Master's Level course on this topic. The phrase value proposition was developed by a thought leader named Michael Lanning. He deserves credit. Many overlook his contribution, and this is not right. Still, why Michael introduced the concept, he did not have the resources to research his idea, though he did apply it in many business scenarios. So our lab embarked on a 10-year research project to understand this concept. We met with Lanning. Then we did a review of the commercial literature from the past 120 years. Then we conducted a review of more than 1,100 academic articles. Then we convened a symposium of top scholars from around the world, from Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge. I actually served as the director of enterprise research for the Transforming Business Institute at Cambridge. And finally, and this is the most important step, we conducted 10,000 plus experiments. We invested $138 million in research partnerships. Looking back, I am still unsatisfied with our work, but we learned. And those learnings drove dramatic increases in revenue. And as I said at the beginning, there's a reason for sharing all this. It's not to impress you, but it is to help you understand that this complexity eventually was tamed, and we achieved a sort of elegant simplicity. And I want to share that with you today. So first, the heuristic that summarizes all of that research. Here it is. Essentially, perceived value minus perceived cost determines the net force of your offer. However, there's a way to take that complexity and make it very simple. And we can do that with a single question. And I want to share that question. That's what this fast class is about today. What is that question? How can we use it to amplify the power of our offer? As I teach you that, let me remind you that we're beginning section 3 of the landing page blueprint. This session will introduce a new paradigm that can help us win the next 4 micro yeses. So there are 3 major points that we need to work through today. Here's the first. We need to understand a critical dialogue. Without this simple paradigm, without this dialogue, we can get lost in our sales copy. We lose the empathetic connection with the customer. Here it is. Will you? Why should I? Because I will. You say, what does that mean? Well, as a marketer, every time you prepare an offer, you're essentially saying, will you? Will you buy my product? Will you sign up for my newsletter? Will you download my white paper? Whatever that ask is. It's framed first in your mind as will you, but within the prospect's mind, there's a defensive counter that occurs at the subconscious level. Why should I? And if you keep what's happening in your mind as the marketer, you can begin to get the right answer and shape a value proposition because your reply is always because I will. Now, you don't have to use the word because, but if you're not fielding a powerful answer to the prospect's question, you can't articulate a value proposition. So your value prop is the beginning of the answer. The word because signifies what's happening next. If you wrote down your value proposition earlier and the word because doesn't fit in front of it, it probably wasn't a value proposition. It might have been a model. It might have been a slogan, but it wasn't a value proposition. Which brings me to the second point. We need to grapple with an ultimate question. This is the key. This is the way to summarize all that research. This is a way to point your thinking in the right direction. Here it is. If I am your ideal prospect, why should I buy from you rather than any of your competitors? Now, it's too easy for the simplicity of this articulation to disguise its profundity, which brings me to the third major point. We need to diagram this question. So we're going to break it into parts. Here's the first, if I. Now, what's happening there? There's a sudden shift, and it's not easy to detect. We're moving from the third person to the first person. And as a marketer, if you cannot shift from third person thinking to first person thinking, if you cannot change your place and become the prospect, you can't really think clear enough to get the value proposition right. So you must challenge every marketer on your team or challenge yourself with this question and begin with if I. And notice I'm your idea prospect. Now, those are three key words also. Why are they so important? Because if you try to put an answer together that's powerful for too many types of persons, you probably won't have an answer that's powerful at all. It's diluted. You're trying to help too many different types of people. So the key is to focus on a customer segment, the segment you can serve best. This requires you to sacrifice. This requires you to take trade-offs. But keep going with me. We're on now to the next critical phrase. Why should I? Now that word why is a signal word. It is signaling that the what comes next is a reason. In fact, it's an ultimate reason, the summation of an argument. Your value proposition is the culmination of a careful argument supported by evidentials. In fact, once again, the word because tells you that, yes, I'm beginning to fit my value proposition into the right mental slot for my prospect. But here comes the hard part, rather than. Now, rather than is implying a choice framework. The prospect can choose someone else's solution. So you have to differentiate yourself. You have to have an only factor. Without that, your value proposition will not be sufficient. Its force will not be powerful enough to drive the value it should. So what does this look like in practice? How would you make this work on a web page? Well, I'm almost out of time. I'm going to show you an example, but we're going to unpack that example in the next fast class. Here it is, though. Look at this control. Consider the difference in this treatment. The treatment was formulated with some of the principles I'm teaching right now. And the treatment outperformed the control by 321%. Now, the control's answer wasn't all wrong. We took their value proposition and we amplified its force using 4 elements, and I'm going to teach you those 4 in the next fast class. Now, I appreciate you staying with me during this fairly dense section of the teaching. We're done for today, but if you will think about this, if you put your own best answers in the YouTube comments, I'll try to help you. In the next session, I'll show you the 4 ways to ratchet up the power, the force of your answer. Thank you for your trust.